Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 16 essential operas in English for beginners. This is a popular demand video, which means at least one person asked for it, because in the world of classical music, one person asking for something is popular demand. But I understand the issue. I really do. I mean, comprehensibility is sort of a big deal. And when I was a kid, just a young'un, what you did back in those days, because you bought beautiful sets of LPs that came with complete texts and translations, and you sat there and you listened to the singing and you followed the text and the translation, and it didn't really matter what language it was in. Nowadays, when it's so hard to get the words with the music as often as not, unless you're watching a video or something like that, which, mind you might very well want to do, with subtitles, you may want to actually have direct communication between you and the singer if your native language is English. And most opera, as you know, is not in English. It's in some other kind of European language. And so I get it. I understand it. If you think it's going to help you to hear it in English, okay, that's great. What I have done here is I've designed this list to actually introduce you to opera, because I think just as important as the language that the opera is in or sung in is the ability to listen to operatic singing, period. You have to get used to the sound of the unamplified, trained human voice, even if it's often done amplified nowadays, because that to me is even a bigger problem. I mean, diction is a huge problem in opera, whether or not it's being sung in English. You cannot understand words, generally speaking, when they are sung by choruses. You're not going to understand what's happening in ensembles where everyone's screaming their own lines. Generally speaking, again, soprano voices particularly, which are the ones most people care about most in opera, are incomprehensible when they get above a certain pitch level. That's stuff that you're going to have to just get used to. And whether it's in English or in Swahili, it is not going to make much difference. And it depends very much on the singer. It depends on the composer. It depends on how awkward the lines are to sing. Sometimes they're terribly awkward. And, so I'm going to just ask you to take the plunge and suggest ways that you can accustom yourself to what you're going to hear. You're still probably going to need a libretto. You're going to need to look at the words one way or another. Usually you can find them online nowadays if you need to. But knowing what's being sung word by word might actually be not such a great thing. It could just drive you crazy as you're trying to make out every single sentence, when the whole point is to take in the general emotional affect of what is being sung, because the emotions are usually pretty clear, even if the words aren't. And depending on the composer, the words are often a mere scaffold for the expression of feeling, which the music, hits you with directly. So, anyway, everybody's different. Everyone's got their own shtick. Everyone has their own way, to cope with the marvelous and sometimes frustrating and crazy thing that is the world of opera. So I'm beginning not with traditional opera, grand opera, but rather with music theater and operetta, because I think that's the best way to get started. It's how I got started. I mean, I can only speak from personal experience, but I grew up in a home where my mother was really, really into Broadway musicals, and we had lots and lots of soundtrack recordings, and that's the kind of singing. It's a little bit more pop type, but there's a lot of very operatic style singing in these works, and it's a great way to get to know some wonderful tunes and the kind of singing you're going to hear, and just accustom yourself to stories told through music, which is really, the very basis of what opera is. So I'm starting with one of the iconic music theater works, Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story. The reason I think should be fairly clear. First of all, the plot is Romeo and Juliet. transported to Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, but it's still Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet has been the subject of a zillion operas and ballets, and in one form or another. So you can very easily go from West Side Story to one of the Romeo and Juliet operas by, say, Gounod or somebody like that. But West Side Story also has a lot of highly professional and stylized singing. It also has dance numbers, which a lot of operas do. And so it's a good way, actually, to get into this thing. It has comic numbers, it has arias, it has the whole gamut of singing styles built into it. And it's a wonderful place to begin. Another music theater piece that I chose because it represents a topos, a topic that pops up all over the place at opera, was Rodgers and Hammerstein's The King and I. First of all, it's got a wonderful score, an absolutely wonderful score. Second of all, the exotic setting will set you up for a lot of what you're going to hear in opera, because opera's almost invariably, well, until they got more modern, took place in exotic locales. And the music may or may not reflect the exoticism of the locale. Usually it does in a westernized, sort of light, colorful way, while still being, of course, traditional Western music. The King and I is one of those. You've got the Orientalisms that permeate the score, but also you've got just wonderful dance numbers and waltz numbers and things like that. Shall we dance on a bright cloud of music? It's a terrific score, and another wonderful way to get yourself into the world of opera in a lighter way, with musical comedy, serious and touching moments, of course. West Side Story is very serious, but there's also a lightness and a mobile quality, and of course there's dialogue. A lot of opera has dialogue, by the way, and so it's very similar to music theater. Singspiel, German Singspiel, Mozart's The Abduction from the Seraglio and The Magic Flute are operas with dialogue, not sung all the way through. So, you depends on what you encounter. Fidelio, Beethoven's Fidelio is one of those. So get used to it and get ready. Next, after you've done your music theater intro, you may want to try, some operetta. And operetta, of course, means Gilbert and Sullivan, if you're English. And Gilbert and Sullivan is fabulous. They are operatic voices, mostly, except for the baritone buffo or tenor buffo roles, which are sort of, character roles. The voices aren't beautiful, but they have to be able to spit out words at a mile a minute to do the patter songs. But two of them are the Mikado, which I chose because, like The King and I, it takes place in an exotic locale in the Orient and the East, in this case Japan, with a score lightly peppered with a Japonisme, which was all the rage in the 1880s. And then the HMS Pinafore, probably the most popular and famous of all of the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas. And if you like this stuff, stick with it. You do not have to move on immediately. You don't have to rush. There is a huge repertoire of Gilbert and Sullivans, more than a dozen of them. American music theater, my God, and English music theater too, with Andrew Lloyd Webber and people like me. You could spend the rest of your life just listening to that. So you have endless choices just within these two subgenres, and there's no reason why you need to push yourself. If you get hooked, good. Listen to more. Do it on your own. You'll be fine. It's terrific. But those four works, I think, are really a nice way to get into gently the idea of opera and the idea of people singing in English. You'll know what you can and cannot understand, what you hope to be able to understand. The other thing about these initial works is that they have wonderful, wonderful words. The words are great. The librettos are great. A lot of operas have stupid words. The librettos are silly. But this gives you music and words which are on a very, very equal basis, and they're equally wonderful, and that is important too. So there you go. So now let's start with a real opera. And one of the things that exists out there, if you didn't know about it, was an organization which has wound down since, but it was called the Peter Morris Foundation, which paid to do unusual operas and opera in English. Traditional European operas translated into English. And some of the performances in that series that were recorded are fabulous. They're on the Chandos label. A lot of them were recorded by the great Charles Mackerras, and one of them is Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel. Now, Hansel and Gretel is an opera that you take kids to get them into opera. And it doesn't matter whether you're a kid or not. It works for children of all ages, as they say in the biz. And you know the story, and it's a terrific opera. The music is gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And Charles Mackerras led an absolutely spectacular performance in English on the Chandos label. Really one of the great recordings of the work, maybe the best recording of the work. So you can go in there and give yourself a genuine English operatic introductory kind of experience with the Chandos recording of Hansel and Gretel with Mackerras conducting. After that, well, Porgy and Bess by Gershwin. That is the great American opera. It's a serious opera. It's through composed. It's all sung, except for the white sheriff. The white characters don't get to sing. All the African American characters get the music, which is a beautiful idea. And it's stunning, and it's 2.5 hours long. So take your time. Give it a chance to soak in. It's going to be an epic. But the music is fabulous. The tunes are well known. And, a lot of people come and listen to it and they think, oh, it wasn't so hard. Well, it's not. It really isn't. It's wonderful. It flows fabulously. It's beautifully shaped. It's an incredible masterpiece. It doesn't get quite the attention that it deserves because it was an opera that was promoted as a musical. Actually, it has the most performances of any musical ever on Broadway when presented in that format. Very, very seriously edited and abbreviated. But the full work is extraordinary, and it's in English. So there you go. A work you may not have heard of, but which is famous in opera circles as an opera in English, is Carlyle Floyd's Susannah. Now, we all know that story, don't we? The story of Susannah and the elders. They watch her taking a nude bath, and they makes them horny, and so they persecute her, and she, basically turns the tables on them, but she gets seduced by the preacher, Reverend Olin Blitch, and her brother shoots him and runs away, and it's all full of drama and craziness in a American rural Appalachian kind of setting, which is lots of fun. So that's definitely an opera that you can sink your fangs into if you're listening to opera in English. It's a very, very good story. Handel also wrote an oratorio on the same subject, Susannah, and you can move to that if you'd like, because oratorios are simply unstaged operas with more choruses, basically, for the most part. And of course, they were invented by Handel, and they were invented in English. We'll have more about that momentarily, but that's something to consider, too. There's lots of choral music in English that you can listen to, which features the same sounds and styles that you hear in operas. So you can take a detour into that particular pocket of musical wonderfulness if it interests you. Samuel Barber, the American composer, wrote an opera called Vanessa. Vanessa is one of those decadent country house type things. Operas, the best operas are all about women in extremis, right? There's Susannah. It's about, women screaming and being tortured and cursing and carrying on and singing about love and vengeance. And, it's all just wonderful. And the more, vicious and nasty it is, the better. Vanessa's pretty nasty. It's a woman in a country house who's doing a Miss Havisham. If you've ever listened to or read Great Expectations, she was abandoned by Anatole, and she's covered all the mirrors in her house so she can't see her age, and she's sitting there waiting for him to return. And he does, but it's not him, because Anatole's actually dead. It's Anatole's son, and I guess he died and left him with a map or something. So he finds his way to this house. Vanessa is living with her younger niece, Erica, and she and Erica are, older and younger, and Anatole falls in love with Erica and sleeps with her and gets her pregnant, but she loses the baby, and eventually Anatole and Vanessa run off together, and Erica is left alone to wait for the return of her erstwhile lover, who was never really there to begin with. And it's one of those. There's a lot of disappointment in that opera, and love and frustration and reasons to sing about it. It's a beautiful work. It's a beautiful work. Your reaction to it's going to depend on how you feel about the characters. There's a baroness who's like, she owns the house and she spends most of the opera not talking to one character or another. Yeah. Give it a shot. You may enjoy it. After Barber, well, the great English opera composer of the 20th century was England's Benjamin Britten. And I have two of his operas here. First, Peter Grimes, which was his first opera and the one that put English opera back on the map internationally. Peter Grimes is a fisherman, and he's quite surly and very antisocial. And he wants to marry Ellen Orford in a relationship which is the least sexual you've ever seen between a man and a woman. I mean, there is nothing physical between these two characters. But theoretically, they at some point are going to, get hitched, or they feel they can. The problem is that Peter Grimes has an apprentice who has died mysteriously at sea. He got sick and died, and he's given a pass on this first one, and he picks up another apprentice, and that apprentice falls off a cliff and dies. Well, the town thinks that Peter Grimes is up to something terribly nefarious. It's an awful accident, and goes after him, and he goes insane and rows his boat out into the sea and sinks it and commits suicide in his madness. It's a really powerful work, full of wonderful numbers and great. The 4C interludes, and is a fantastic orchestral work that Benjamin Britten drew from the full score. It's definitely worth hearing. It's full of character. The town has individual characters who are very vividly portrayed. So Peter Grimes is definitely something to get into if you're interested in opera in English. You really sort of have to. You don't have a choice. So, you always have a choice. But the other Benjamin Britten opera that you should listen to for sure is The Turn of the Screw, which is one of the shattering masterpieces of 20th century music, maybe Britten's greatest work. It's a ghost story by Henry James, fabulous ghost story, about two little children who are haunted by the ghosts of their dead governess and groundskeeper, Peter Quint. And a new governess shows up and is left alone with them and a maid. They have to, and the ghosts pop up and have quite a good time with everybody. And Miles, the little boy, winds up dying in the governess's arms. It's really intense. And it's written as a theme in variations. That is a melody. Where there are brief scenes interspersed with variations on the main theme in between the various scenes. It's fantastic, amazingly well done, and brilliant. And you should really hear it. It's just a great piece of music. I mean, I can play it without even paying attention to the words, but the words are unusually clear unless everybody's singing together. So after that, well, another English opera, Tippett's The Midsummer Marriage. Now, The Midsummer Marriage is kind of crazy. It's an updating of Mozart's Magic Flute. It's essentially the same topic, the same subject as the Magic Flute, but it's written in a wonderfully tonal, melodic, contemporary idiom, full of richness and orchestral delights. The plot makes no sense whatsoever. The English setting, Tippett's English setting, is always awkward. Which is sort of fun to listen to. You sort of wondering, why is that word stressed that way? But it's got fabulous writing for the chorus, and I adore the work. I really do. It has dancing in it. It's got all kinds of stuff going on. You will want to look at the words, and then when you look at the words, you'll probably wish you hadn't bothered, because they are strange. It has Jungian psychology in it and things like that. It's very, very modern, but it's a great work. It's a great work in one of these seminal operas in English. It was premiered in the 1950s. So the Midsummer Marriage is great. Now we're going to take a step backwards, because you see, one of the weird things about opera in English is that they're either contemporary 20th century things, or they're very early, because it's Handel. You're dealing with Baroque music. In the middle, there's very little that isn't operetta. There are operas in English, there are, but, that anyone pays attention to, not so much. So we did the operetta stuff, and that gets you through the 19th century. But if you want to go back a little, Handel wrote operas in Italian. But after writing 30 or so of those, he gave up writing, a lot of them. He gave up writing opera in Italian and switched to oratorio, English oratorio, because the audience presumably would have been more open to hearing that sort of thing. And in the process of writing English oratorios, he slipped in a couple operas, because most oratorios, by definition, are sacred oratorios. That is, they're theater works performed in concert form, but the topics are normally a biblical derivation one way or another. Well, he did a couple traditional opera things, Semele and Hercules. They are really just operas. They have more choruses than Italian traditional Baroque opera did, but this was Handel's hybrid version of the form. And when audiences came to see Semele, they said, that's not an oratorio, it's a bawdy opera. And it is, and it's fabulous. Semele is about the narcissistic girlfriend of Zeus, who insists on seeing him in his true form and gets fried to a crisp as a result. Hercules is about actually Deianira, his jealous wife, who takes the cloak dipped in the blood of the centaur Nessus, which is toxic, and has him wear it, and he dies writhing in agony because she thinks he's fooling around with a captive princess, and she goes crazy. And Deianira's mad scene is one of the coolest things that anybody ever wrote. It's just fantastic. So you can listen to either of those with complete impunity. The words are also easy to find, and they're big works. Hercules is actually pretty concise. It's 2.5 hours a bit. Semele is big, long, and marvelous. So after that, well, we've got 3 more operas to cover, one of them in English, 2 of them translated. First, Menotti's The Medium. Now, Giancarlo Menotti was Samuel Barber's boyfriend and wrote the text to a lot of his operas. And Menotti also was a composer of opera, principally. And he wrote a whole pile of them, and a lot of them, most of them are in English, and some of them are wonderful. He composed Amal and the Night Visitors, the ultimate Christmas opera for television. But I chose The Medium because it's like spooky and creepy and demented. It's a wonderful opera about a fake psychic who does seances, which, with her daughter, which are all phony, and a boy named Toby, who her daughter is in love with. And she's going crazy, the medium, because she feels actual supernatural powers, and she can't really talk about it. Nobody believes it. Nobody believes her, and she's an alcoholic, and it's a mess. And she winds up shooting Toby. It's a 2-act opera that takes about an hour. So it's a wonderful piece to sort of whet your appetite for opera in English, and it's a good story. And it's also a ghost story in its way, and similar to The Turn of the Screw. So I'm putting things together that give you a little bit of a push, things that you can listen to that are similar to other things, so that you can make comparisons. And then we've got 2 absolutely amazing operas that are translated into English. The first is Jenufa by Janáček. There's a stunning recording on Chandos, conducted by Charles Mackerras. It's part of that opera in English series. The action takes place in a Czech village. Jenufa is pregnant by her boyfriend, who is about to be inducted into the army, and she's hoping he isn't, because they got to get married fast before she starts to show. But Janáček's boyfriend's foster brother, they're all kind of related. It's very complicated. But is also in love with Jenufa. They have an argument, and he slashes her cheek, so she's no longer beautiful. So her boyfriend refuses to marry her, and her foster mother, the Kostelnichka, who's extremely strict and nasty and gnarly, locks her away until the baby is born, and then decides to kill the baby to try and rescue Jenufa's honor. And after she kills the baby, Lotsa, the guy who slashed her, agrees to marry her. Looks wonderful, right? And the stepmother takes the baby and stuffs it under the ice in the river, and her foster mother, whatever she is. And then in the third act, they're getting married, and it's sunny and lovely, and the river thaws out, and guess who pops up and floats to the surface? So that causes a certain tumult, and Jenufa realizes what has happened, and Lotsa realizes what has happened, her erstwhile husband, and it actually ends with hope. Kostelnichka confesses to the murder, they take her away to jail, and everybody leaves, and Jenufa, I keep saying that, Jenufa and Lotsa agree to give it a shot and make a life together. It is one of the most emotionally gripping pieces you'll ever hear in your life. The role of Kostelnichka, the foster mother, is possibly the most terrifying and harrowing character roles in all of opera. And it's short. It's about an hour and 45 minutes in 3 acts. And it's incredible. So you listen to that Mackerras recording on Chandos in English. The last one in English is Poulenc's Dialogues of the Carmelites, which in English is simply called the Carmelites, at least in this recording on Chandos in English, conducted by Paul Daniel. It's a story about a convent of nuns during the French Revolution who are condemned to be martyred, and they go to the guillotine one by one, singing the Salve Regina. In a more general sense, or a more specific sense, actually, the main character is Blanche, who is a neurotic young girl who's nervous and antisocial, and she runs away to join the convent, thinking that she will be sheltered for her life, and discovers just the opposite. And it's really, really gripping. And Poulenc, who wrote it originally in French, of course, insisted that it be performed in the language of the country in which it was being sung. So it's frequently done in English. It was premiered in Italian at La Scala. And there's nothing wrong with hearing it in English. And there's a fantastic performance on Chandos in English. It's the only one. And it's in English on disc. And on video, you can find a lot of these things. You like I said, you may want to see the visuals along with the story, at least the first time through. But that's the list. 16 essential operas in English for beginners. And it's not the traditional stuff, because opera in English is not traditional. If you want, La Traviata or Lucia di Lammermoor or Wagner's Ring. Well, Wagner's Ring has been done in English, but in an incredibly lethargic performance led by Reginald Goodall. It's part of that opera in English series on Chandos. But if you want to hear these things, the traditional European operas, get used to opera in English first, and then see how you feel about hearing it in its original language. It's all up to you. There's plenty from which to choose. And that's the point of this list, to get you going. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.